Welcome to Clinical Data Talks, a podcast brought to you by CRS Cube. I'm your host, Sylvain Berthelot. Join me and industry experts as we discuss the latest trends impacting the world of clinical data. I'm very pleased to welcome Brian Barnes to the podcast today. He has worked for a CRO, an e-clinical vendor, and now a sponsor, and he's acquired a wealth of experience in risk assessment along the way. He's now the Director of Risk Management Strategy at BioNTech. So if you're interested in RBQM and risk management in general, you're in for a treat. Hi, Brian. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you again for the opportunity to join.
Well, it's a pleasure. And I have high expectations. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you today. As you have a lot of experience in today's topic. What I found interesting is when we were preparing for the podcast and you described your role to me, you said that you're a risk assessment facilitator. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think for me, coming to BioNTech, as you kind of shared in the introduction, I've come from being in the CRO space for quite a few years and then had an opportunity to develop technology. But in the CRO and technology, I didn't really have an opportunity that I felt to be able to interact and induce, kind of the change that we're looking for or that industry and regulators have been striving for. So a unique opportunity came up with BioNTech where starting after Comirnaty and some of our COVID-19 vaccine work, had an opportunity to redevelop our pipeline. And what was exciting is how can we build some of these risk-based strategies and risk-based thinking into early operational development. So as the risk management facilitator, and my risk management role was really to start, how do we build a framework within BioNTech to support these risk-based approaches? And so the first step that I started with was, defining what does a good risk management strategy look like? And so, coming on the heels that we've seen recently in January, ICH E6R3, R2 previously to that, and some of the ICH E8 R1 really gave us good frameworks of quality by design. And it's nothing new really to kind of the global community outside of, clinical development. It's a lot of just standard practices about good clinical kind of practices or quality by design principles. But for me, bringing that to BioNTech was first kind of creating an SOP, a structure and an architecture for us to be able to start taking these risk-based approaches. So for me now as a facilitator, I've been at BioNTech for about a year and a half now, the SOP in effect for over a year. And so now, as part of my role as a facilitator, is how do we start implementing? And for me, I think that's the exciting piece and the component that I liked is how do you start embedding yourself within these different cross-functional teams to facilitate these risk-based conversations? So for me, it's being kind of an active practitioner and how do we start leading our teams and our organizations to take these kind of risk-based approaches.
Okay. Well, that sounds like you must have a lot on your plate. And what's your goal? Because you mentioned the regulations, which obviously drive in a way the focus on risk management. But at BioNTech, or maybe just you personally, what's your goal with risk management?
So I think the first piece, when we look at kind of the goals or outcomes, what are the drivers that we're looking for is how do we support participant safety and data quality oversight, right? And that's what regulators globally have kind of given us as that anchor spot to focus on, right? So that's the question that I always come back to and work with asking my teams and really our partners across, our outsourced partner or vendor activities are, how can we focus on protecting participant safety and data quality? So those are two very simple questions that we ask. And then with that, and where I like risk-based strategies is focusing on risk proportionality. And so what that means and how I kind of describe it quickly to our teams are, we cannot take a one-size-fits-all approach. And so when we do take one-size-fits-all, we get a disproportionate focus on areas that don't bring us the greatest impact. Yeah. So, and we'll talk, and I think this is where industry can start to lean in, is driving efficiency. So risk proportionality really equals efficiency. And efficiency in clinical trial development is really one of the foundational frameworks of what industry and regulators are looking for, is how do we drive higher quality products to the market, really bringing them with higher quality and focus on the participant safety and data quality. So risk-based kind of thinking and practices and risk proportionality helps us drive efficiency and into that product development life cycle.
That's interesting, because what I hear from the industry, at least at the moment, is a lot focused on regulations, like we need to do this. But you're bringing the efficiency point into it, which I fully agree. Like you would expect that from a more risk-based approach. How do you think RBQM specifically can drive an increase in efficiency?
Yeah, so this has kind of been my kind of goal for the last maybe 15 years is taking those risk-based approaches. So like I shared just a moment ago, is focusing on what matters most, right? And so sometimes we talk about it as being like, what is the North Star? So as we're talking to the teams, how do we help them, and everybody cross-functionally, right? And this is kind of going back to the role of the facilitator, is as that kind of leader, how do you get everybody focused in the same direction, right? So that everybody understands what's important, and then more importantly, what's not important, right? So as we're making key decisions throughout the trial conduct activities, if we're going through database logs, if we're going through interim analysis, if we're going through these different checkpoints, as we're going through data cleaning and data quality oversight, we all need to be focused on the same outcome. So the kind of cycle that I always talk to our teams about, and really the structure that we're setting up in this quality by design framework, is what we call a plan, do, check, act, right? So it's kind of a classic quality management life cycle that, you know, the planning phase comes in during the risk assessment, right? And that's kind of where my foundational framework and passion for risk management comes in, is planning in the beginning. And then doing the activities, right? So doing would be the trial conduct, right? Collecting the data, all of those activities that we think about in trial conduct. And then the check is the most important spot, right? So it's not like we're blindly just going to say, hey, we thought about it and we're just going to move forward in this direction, but we need to come back and check ourselves, right? And we can talk about that in more detail, but that's where metrics and data become very important, is checking the thought processes that we had. Were we right? Do we need to make adjustments, yes or no? And that's kind of the last piece of that, is making those adjustments. So, right, based on those data and data-driven decisions, how are we adjusting our path forward? And I like to connect this back to your maybe kind of previous conversation or question about regulation, right? Everybody kind of says, oh, we have to do this. This is what the regulators are doing. What I hear from, kind of reading, guidance documents and conversations that we see from regulators, is you're not going to get it right every time at the beginning, right? That's an unrealistic expectation. Yeah. But it's the growth and the continued process improvement that is the most critical piece, right? And that's where it's a continued evolution of telling a story. And that's kind of what I, again, describe to my teams, is risk management is about a story well told. And so as we go into inspections and as we get ready for audits, it's about telling a story. You're not going to get it right at the beginning. I've never been on a trial. Maybe you have seen a trial that has gotten it right from the beginning. It just doesn't exist. And if you do have one, please share, because I'd love to do an investigation on that. But it's how do we continue to tell that good story? And a lot of that is good documentation, good data oversight, and just continuing to spin and be a little bit better every day throughout our trial conduct.
Yeah, that all makes sense. There's something that frustrates me a bit about RBQM at the moment, because I think it's a great tool, and I completely agree that risk assessment is very important. However, and you may not agree with that, so tell me if you don't, but I believe that what we're seeing currently is kind of a slow adoption, because you've described a process that sounds quite heavy in a way. And I can imagine that, and maybe you were in that position yourself, that it's difficult to demonstrate how much return on investment the company will see, despite it, as you said, being directed at increasing efficiency. So how would you demonstrate return on investment?
I think there's a couple of ways that industry's kind of thought about it before, right? And I think there's a couple of, important technology advancements that can help us demonstrate that better. Mm-hmm. So I think one of, first of all, I agree with your conversation that change management and adoption has been less than what we would hope, but I think everything in industry kind of takes a little bit longer than we initially thought. But I think we're on a good path. We've demonstrated through some recent work that I had supported a couple of years ago with ACRO, and some of the more recent work coming out of Transcelerate, and some of the other industry consortia is kind of starting to demonstrate some of this ROI, which is important. But I think one of the biggest crutches that we haven't been able to really get a clear line of sight on ROI is we're looking for things that we have prevented happening, and that's very hard to quantify, right? So as we start to do these early risk assessments and planning up front, we're trying to prevent things from happening. So how do you quantify that thing that doesn't happen, right? In my opinion, it takes a little bit of a skilled practitioner to be able to properly identify and drive those efficiencies into the process. And what I mean by that is, and this is coming back to the risk assessment, is being able to properly identify and clearly communicate what is important, right? So if we have these buckets of all of the data is important, we are going to get these disproportionate use of on-site activities to oversee that. So it's really taking a very pragmatic approach to how we're identifying that data. So with that good, astute lens, we can focus on the data that matters most. And then we have to, this is the second piece of risk-based quality management, is driving effective mitigation strategies, right? So that's really what the output of risk management is we need to put fit for purpose mitigation strategies into place. And those mitigation strategies are what we historically think of monitoring activities, right? Your on-site monitoring, your centralized monitoring, really the data management activities, our medical pharmacovigilance activities, all of those are risk control mechanisms. And so we need to apply those in a fit for purpose way. And with that focus on what matters most, we can get those tailored to really identify and focus on those risks we are, right? And that does take a lot of iteration and a very focused early mindset to drive those into budgets and drive those into the trial conduct conversations early. So I think, yes, I've seen some of those, but I've also seen where if we don't have that really good focused identification early, we can start to get disproportionate outcomes at the end, and the ROIs just aren't demonstrated.
Yeah. I understand what you mean. So you mentioned technology in passing, but that's something personally I'm very interested in, as you would expect, and I know you are as well. So you talked about emergence of technology over the past couple of years that helps with risk-based quality management and this ROI. So do you think the technology is here now to support you in that process?
Yes and no. So I think the short answer is yes, but I don't think industry has fully embraced the opportunities that are there. And what I mean by that is when I kind of say, yes, I love technology, having spent a little bit of my previous career in the technology space was a great eye-opening experience for me about how to build technology and how technology development builds. On a side case, the way that we build technology is very similar to the way that we do trial conduct. And that was kind of the fun thing, is when we think about these risk-based approaches and you look at lean and agile product development, it's the same principles and practices that we are trying to embed in trial conduct. So we're not introducing anything revolutionary and new with risk-based quality management and quality by design. a number of industries already apply these practices. We're just trying to embrace them in the way that we have been so rigidly doing it historically. But anyway, I think with technology, the first kind of wave that we saw that I think kind of unlocked a lot of this efficiency and optimization for us in trial conduct is kind of with big data analytics, right? I kind of think of that. Oh, your thoughts here. I see that maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, right? We've seen this emergence of big data and being able to analyze big data. And that's where I think centralized monitoring really helped support what industry was kind of doing as kind of a targeted SDV strategy beginning early, right? So just focusing on reducing the amount of on-site source data verification that happened. And that's what I said, that was maybe 5-10 years ago. So centralized monitoring activities really started to grow in the space, I think in the last 5 years, really kind of on the heels of COVID. COVID was a great proof case and example for us of how we can demonstrate some of the value in large data sets. So great. I think that big data analytics is available now. But for me, in the last 2 years, I think, right, and you can do that is with AI and machine learning. And so that's kind of the next piece of evolution that I'm sure everybody's heard across the globe, right? But how do we apply that in our trial conduct, right? So that's kind of where I see the next opportunity in terms of thinking about quality by design, thinking about risk-based quality management. How do we start to embed these AI and ML technologies into the way that we do trial conduct?
I just have one last quick question on AI, actually. There's talks of like maybe AI helping us build technology. And I can see it because like data mining, data visualizations could be done relatively easily in the future using tools that leverage AI. Is that something you think, like as a sponsor, at least in your role, yes, in the future, I don't know, I'll build my own RBQM tool because I can do it?
I think it's a very interesting opportunity, right? And I think the piece, and again, for me, as I moved into the technology, I don't have a background in coding, right? I don't have a technology background, and that's why it was so interesting for me to go join that space of the industry, is because I got exposure to things I'd never seen before, which was great. But for me, one thing I've always done is I've always thought about learning to code. Could I maybe get some different career opportunities, some different perspectives if I knew how to code, right? I think with AI, the piece that it does that is you don't need to know how to code anymore, right? And I think that's what it opens up the door to more people. And I think that's what's so exciting. And that's a kind of another wrinkle and use case that we've done that I think is interesting, where just entering data into the large language models and asking the right prompts and having a conversation correctly with the data, you can actually unlock a lot of the same ideas that you can with kind of a more structured data analytics. And so by no means am I saying is it going to erase, the great technology kind of vendors that are out there, but I think it's it's a place to augment that, right? So I think the short answer is I think AI can help us build technology because it removes maybe some of the barriers that have historically been there in terms of just skill sets. So you are able to introduce a different persona or person into there with a different maybe lens that's thinking about things differently, and maybe that can help us unlock some of the pieces. So I will say, yes, I even use some of the prompting and soft coding to do some analytics for some of our oversight activities as we move through, right, without a formal technology piece. So I think the short answer is yeah, I think technology or AI can help us build better technology and also replace some of the technology vendors that may be in place today.
Wow. Well, scary future for us.
For you, yeah, it's good.
We'll adapt.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, I just have one last question for you today, which is a bit off topic, but I love asking that question to all my guests. What's the best piece of advice you've received that you consistently apply in the workspace?
I think for me, The best thing I can say, and the thing that I ask myself every day, is how do I start? And I think just getting over the hurdle of starting is the biggest piece forward, right? And so as we look at just basic procrastination and things on tasks, and honestly, this is where I think AI has helped me, is I just got to start, right? And I
Yeah.
think getting over that. So whatever the task is, if it's, you know, an email or a risk assessment or some type of oversight or just having a difficult conversation, it's just starting, right? And so it's the idea of starting and just getting 1% better every day. And so, like I said, kind of earlier in the podcast, is you're not going to be perfect at the beginning. So removing that expectation of, it has to be perfect before I start. And that's something I took from the technology space and kind of the idea of the classic MVP is like, what is the most basic version of this that I can put out and get the ball rolling? And as we get the ball rolling, we learn a lot, right? And that's kind of where I come back to the risk management principles is, let's just start and let's have a good continuous process improvement mindset and just continue to iterate, right? And that continuous iteration and process improvement is what's going to drive us to be better. So for me, it's just say, let's just start. What is the lowest and most simple product that I could put out today to start the conversation, and we build from that.
That's nice. I like that. And you can apply it anywhere. But yeah, no, you're right. I can completely see how it can be difficult to start, but then like focusing on the start rather than the big piece that you need to achieve, which most of the times feels daunting. That's a very good. Yeah. Wow, amazing. Brian, thank you so much. I've learned a lot. I feel like I want to learn more. So we might do another one focused on AI. We'll see if you're up for it.
Excellent. Would love to. Thanks again for the opportunity.
No, thank you. And thanks everyone for watching us today or listening. It's been a pleasure, and you can find more Clinical Data Talks episodes on our website.